The battlefield was a graveyard of metal and flesh, drenched in fire and blood. Smoke choked the air, and the distant echoes of plasma fire and screams blended into a nightmarish symphony of war. Lieutenant Ryan Carter ducked behind a fallen piece of wreckage, his pulse hammering in his ears as he checked his ammunition. His squad was down to their last reserves, and the enemy kept coming. The Selkarth were relentless. Taller than humans, their exoskeletons glistening under the dim red glow of the burning sky. Their armor absorbed bullets like rain on steel, and their energy weapons cut through human defenses with merciless precision. Humanity had been fighting a losing war for years, and this battle was no different. Carter tapped the side of his helmet, switching to the squad comms. "Daniels, report." Static crackled before Private Jen Daniels' voice came through, strained but steady. "Holding position near the downed transport, sir. We lost Myers. It's just me and O'Connor now." Carter cursed under his breath. Every loss was another nail in humanity's coffin. He peeked over the wreckage and saw them. Selkarth soldiers moving in coordinated waves, advancing through the ruins of what used to be a human colony. A warship hovered overhead, its cannons still smoldering from an earlier orbital bombardment. The bastards weren't leaving survivors. "Fall back to the rally point," Carter ordered. "Negative, sir. We got wounded here," Daniels protested. Carter clenched his jaw. He wanted to save them. God, he wanted to. But staying in one place was suicide. Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the battlefield, sending him sprawling. His ears rang as he scrambled to his feet, vision blurred. That's when he saw it. A Selkarth soldier lay in a crater a few feet away, struggling to move. Unlike the others, this one wasn't armored in pristine battle gear. His exoskeleton was cracked, black blood oozing from deep wounds across his chest and limbs. His breathing was ragged, his four-fingered hands clawing at the dirt as he tried to rise. A commander, Carter realized, recognizing the intricate markings on his damaged armor. This wasn't just any soldier. This was someone important. The logical choice was to put a bullet in him. That was the rule of war: kill or be killed. If their positions were reversed, the alien wouldn't hesitate. Carter tightened his grip on his rifle. The Selkarth's glowing yellow eyes met his, filled with something Carter hadn't expected: pain, exhaustion, and fear. For a moment, the sounds of battle faded. Carter saw not a monster, not the enemy who had slaughtered his people for years, but a dying soldier. Someone who, despite everything, still clung to life. Carter made his choice. "Medic," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Private O'Connor, a field medic, hesitated before rushing over. "Sir, what the hell are you doing?" "Saving him," Carter said. O'Connor looked at the alien, then back at Carter like he'd lost his mind. "He's the enemy. He's bleeding out," Carter snapped. "Either help or get out of my way." O'Connor swore under his breath, but knelt beside the wounded alien, pulling out a med kit. The Selkarth flinched, his mandibles twitching in a weak attempt to snarl. "I don't think he's a fan of this plan," O'Connor muttered. Carter ignored him, keeping his rifle trained on the alien just in case. "Tell me, do your people let their wounded die?" The alien coughed, black blood trickling down his jaw. "Mercy is weakness." His voice was deep, guttural, but the translator in Carter's helmet made the words clear. "That why you're still fighting to breathe?" Carter challenged. "Because you're weak." The alien said nothing. His body trembled, the pain overtaking him. O'Connor worked fast, sealing wounds and injecting stabilizers, but there was only so much human medicine could do for an alien physiology. A burst of gunfire reminded Carter that they were still in the middle of a war. He turned just in time to see a squad of Selkarth moving toward them, weapons raised. "Daniels, we've got incoming." "On it," she yelled. A second later, a sniper shot rang out, taking down the lead alien. The others scattered for cover, but it gave Carter the opening he needed. "Pick him up," he ordered O'Connor. You're kidding. O'Connor groaned but obeyed, struggling to lift the heavy alien onto his back. Carter fired covering shots as Daniels and the remaining soldiers regrouped. We're leaving. They sprinted through the wreckage, dodging enemy fire. Plasma bolts hissed past, melting steel and rock where they struck. Behind them, the Selkarth forces reorganized, their war cries piercing the smoke-filled air. Then the sky turned to fire. A massive explosion ripped through the battlefield as another orbital bombardment commenced. The Selkarth were wiping everything out, human and alien alike. They didn't care who was still down there. They weren't taking prisoners. Carter pushed his team forward, lungs burning. The heat from the blast waves seared their skin as they dove into a ruined bunker. The walls shook, debris raining down around them. And then, silence. Carter's breath came in ragged gasps. The only sound was the distant crackling of flames. His squad had made it. Barely. O'Connor groaned, setting the alien down. Daniels collapsed against the wall, wiping blood from a cut on her cheek. The alien commander, barely conscious, looked at Carter through half-lidded eyes. You saved me, he rasped. Carter met his gaze. Yeah, I did. The alien let out a breath, a strange, broken sound that almost sounded like laughter. Foolish. Human. Carter smirked. Maybe. But you're still alive. The alien closed his eyes, slipping into unconsciousness. Daniels shook her head. You think that was worth it, sir? Carter looked out at the burning remains of the battlefield. I guess we'll find out. The ground trembled beneath their feet as a distant explosion sent a shockwave through the ruins. Carter gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle tighter. The invasion had begun. The Selkarth weren't just searching for survivors anymore. They were launching a full-scale attack. Daniels cursed under her breath. Command better have a damn good extraction plan because we're not making it out of here on foot. O'Connor peered through a broken window, his face pale. It's worse than we thought. Dropships are coming in, hundreds of them. Carter moved to his side and felt his stomach tighten. The sky was filled with dark, insect-like vessels descending from the clouds. Fires raged in the distance, and the sound of heavy artillery pounded through the air. The Selkarth were overwhelming the remaining human forces. Behind him, Gervos sat in silence, watching the destruction unfold. His glowing yellow eyes reflected the fire outside. Daniels turned toward him, her expression hard. Still think we should have left you to die. Gervos didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was unreadable. Death comes for all. Carter ignored their exchange and tapped his comm. Command, this is Lieutenant Carter. We are trapped behind enemy lines, requesting immediate extraction. Do you copy? Static. O'Connor frowned. Jamming signal. Carter nodded. Most likely. They're cutting us off. Daniels clenched her jaw. So what's the plan? Because sitting here isn't an option. Carter took a deep breath, thinking. Their original extraction point was miles away, but with the city collapsing under the invasion, they needed a new route. Gervos suddenly spoke. There is an underground tunnel network. It runs beneath the city, an old human structure repurposed for military use. O'Connor raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you know about that? Gervos's mandibles twitched. Because we mapped it before the invasion. Daniel scoffed. Of course you did. Carter considered the information. If the tunnels were intact, they might be able to slip past enemy patrols and reach a safer location. But trusting an enemy to guide them, that was a risk. He met Gervos's gaze. You help us get there, and maybe we all make it out alive. The alien studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then we must leave now. The squad moved quickly, navigating through the crumbling ruins. Fires burned in the distance, and the air was thick with smoke and the scent of death. Bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and Selkarth, littered the streets. The war had already claimed too many lives. As they advanced, a sudden burst of gunfire forced them to take cover behind a collapsed building. A Selkarth patrol was sweeping through the area, their energy weapons cutting through the darkness. Daniels gritted her teeth. "They're blocking our path." Carter glanced at Gervos. "Any ideas?" The alien's eyes flickered. "A direct fight will draw more of them." O'Connor tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then we don't fight. We outmaneuver." Carter nodded. "We flank them. Quick, quiet, no mistakes." Daniels took position on the left while Carter and O'Connor moved right. Gervos stayed in the center, his alien senses sharp. Carter signaled. Daniels threw a small rock to the side, drawing the patrol's attention. The moment they turned, Carter and O'Connor struck. Gunfire erupted. The first Selkarth went down instantly, but the second turned, raising his weapon. Before he could fire, Gervos lunged. His claws slashed across the enemy's throat, ending the fight in seconds. O'Connor exhaled. "Damn, that was fast." Gervos straightened, his expression unreadable. They were careless. Daniels eyed him warily. "Guess we're lucky you're on our side. For now." They moved again, weaving through the city's ruins. Finally, they reached a hidden access point leading underground. The tunnel entrance was partially buried under debris, but with some effort, they cleared a path and descended into the darkness. The air inside was damp and stale. Faint emergency lights flickered along the tunnel walls, casting eerie shadows. Carter led the way, his rifle raised. "Keep moving. We're not safe yet." As they advanced, Gervos suddenly halted. His posture tensed. Carter frowned. "What is it?" The alien's voice was low. "Something is here." A deep guttural growl echoed through the tunnel. The squad turned as figures emerged from the shadows. Selkarth enforcers, heavily armored, their weapons hummed with deadly energy. These weren't just soldiers. They were executioners. Daniels cursed. "They knew we'd come this way." The lead enforcer stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Gervos. "You are a disgrace." Gervos met his stare. "And yet, I still breathe." The enforcer's mandibles twitched, not for long. The battle erupted in an instant. Energy blasts lit up the tunnel as Carter and his team dove for cover. The enforcers moved with terrifying precision, their strikes powerful and deliberate. Carter fired, dropping one of them, but more kept coming. O'Connor took a hit to the shoulder, grunting in pain. Gervos charged. His claws tore through an enforcer's armor, his movements fluid and deadly. But there were too many. A blast struck Daniels, sending her crashing against the wall. Blood dripped from her forehead as she struggled to get up. Carter saw another enforcer take aim at her. He didn't think. He just moved. Diving forward, he tackled Daniels out of the way as the blast struck where she had been standing. Gervos let out a furious snarl, ripping through the last enforcer. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. Carter pushed himself up, his chest burning. Everyone, still alive. Daniels wiped blood from her eyes. Barely. O'Connor groaned, clutching his wounded shoulder. Could be worse. Gervos straightened, his gaze lingering on the fallen enforcers. "They were sent to silence me." Carter met his eyes. "Looks like they failed." The alien let out a slow breath. For now. Carter glanced down the tunnel. The battle outside raged on, but they still had a chance. He motioned forward. "Let's move." Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing heavy. The tunnel had bought them time, but not much. The Selkarth were relentless. They had overwhelming numbers, superior technology, and complete control of the battlefield. By all logic, humanity should have already fallen. But logic had never accounted for human stubbornness. Daniels limped forward, pressing a hand to her side where the earlier fight had left her bruised. "So what's the plan, boss? Because I'm not in the mood to roll over and die." O'Connor checked his rifle, wincing at the pain in his wounded shoulder. "Yeah, And we can't run forever. If we're going down, I'd rather take some of those bastards with us. Carter glanced at Shervos. The alien was silent, his glowing yellow eyes scanning the tunnel ahead. His body was still tense from the fight, but there was something else, something calculating. You know something we don't, Carter said. Shervos didn't deny it. The invasion fleet's command node is located above the city, a floating citadel, heavily shielded, protected by thousands of my kind. He turned his gaze toward Carter. Destroy that, and their forces will lose coordination. It will not win you the war, but it will give your people a chance. Daniels laughed bitterly. Right, so all we have to do is take out a fortress in the sky. Easy. O'Connor shook his head. Even if we wanted to, how the hell do we get up there? Shervos stepped closer, his voice measured. There is a way. Carter narrowed his eyes. You were part of the invasion force. You know the weak points. The alien nodded. A supply outpost several clicks from here. It is used to transport weapons and personnel to the command node. If we take control of it, we can infiltrate the fortress. Daniels gave a skeptical look. So you're suggesting we sneak onto one of your ships, fly straight into the heart of enemy territory, and sabotage their command structure? Shervos tilted his head. Yes. O'Connor exhaled. You know, I always wanted to die doing something spectacularly stupid. Carter smirked. Then let's not die. They moved swiftly, navigating the underground tunnels until they emerged into the war-torn city once more. Fires burned all around them. The streets were littered with destroyed vehicles and fallen soldiers. Human resistance was still holding out in pockets, but the Selkarth were overwhelming them. Carter felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for humanity's future. They reached the outskirts of the supply outpost just as another wave of Selkarth reinforcements arrived. The area was a heavily guarded checkpoint, with automated turrets, patrolling soldiers, and sleek alien dropships loading supplies. Daniels cursed. This place is a fortress. Shervos studied the defenses. A direct assault would be suicide. We must strike with precision. Carter thought for a moment, then pointed toward a large fuel depot near the center of the outpost. We create a distraction, blow that, and it'll send the entire base into chaos. O'Connor grinned. I like it. Shervos considered the plan before nodding. Once the explosion occurs, security will be drawn away from the transport vessels. That is when we strike. Daniels exhaled. All right, let's make some noise. They moved carefully, using the ruins for cover. Carter and O'Connor circled around toward the depot, while Daniels and Shervos positioned themselves near the transport ships. The plan was simple: cause as much destruction as possible, and use the confusion to steal a vessel. Carter set the charges against the fuel tanks, his fingers steady despite the tension in his gut. If this didn't work, there would be no second chance. O'Connor gave him a quick nod. Ready when you are. Carter clicked the detonator. The explosion was instant and devastating. A massive fireball erupted into the sky, sending shockwaves through the outpost. The blast tore through structures, flipping vehicles and igniting ammunition stores. Alarms blared as the Selkarth scrambled to respond. Daniels wasted no time. Go now. They sprinted toward the transport ships as chaos unfolded around them. The Selkarth were too focused on containing the fires to notice a small group of humans boarding one of their vessels. Shervos moved quickly, accessing the ship's controls with practiced ease. I can fly this, but we will have only minutes before they realize what we've done. Carter strapped in. Then let's make those minutes count. The ship roared to life, its engines lifting them off the ground. Selkarth forces finally noticed the theft, opening fire as they ascended. Energy blasts struck the hull, but Shervos maneuvered skillfully, weaving through enemy fire. The transport shot into the sky, breaking through the lower atmosphere toward the floating command citadel. Daniels gripped her seat. I can't believe this is actually working. O'Connor laughed despite himself. Give it time. Carter stayed focused. The hardest part was still ahead. The Selkarth wouldn't let them board without a fight. Gervaux's claws moved over the controls. I will transmit an emergency clearance code. It may fool their sensors for a short time. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Wait, you still have clearance. Gervaux didn't look at her. For now. The ship approached the massive citadel, a floating fortress of alien architecture. Energy fields surrounded it, glowing with a pulsing blue light. Dozens of defense turrets lined the structure, ready to obliterate anything unauthorized. Gervaux transmitted the code. The turrets didn't fire. Carter exhaled. That actually worked. The transport was guided toward a landing bay inside the citadel. As they touched down, Gervaux turned to them. Once we step out, there is no turning back. O'Connor grinned. Wasn't planning on it. Carter checked his weapon. Let's finish this. The doors opened, and they stepped into the belly of the beast. The landing bay was eerily silent, save for the hum of alien machinery. The moment Carter and his team stepped off the transport, their boots echoed against the sleek metallic floor. The Selkarth command citadel loomed around them, towering walls, glowing conduits pulsing with energy, and long corridors stretching into the unknown. O'Connor tightened his grip on his rifle. I don't like this. It's too quiet. Daniel scanned the area, her nerves on edge. They know we're here. They're just waiting. Carter glanced at Gervaux. Where's the control center? The alien's eyes flickered as he pointed toward a towering structure at the end of the hangar. That conduit leads directly to the Citadel's core. The command node is there. Destroy it, and their entire network will collapse. Carter nodded. Then we move fast. They sprinted toward the corridor, weapons raised. The further they went, the more the silence pressed against them. It was unnatural, like something was watching. Then the attack came. A burst of plasma fire rained down from above as Selkarth enforcers emerged from the walls, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Red warning lights flashed, sirens blaring through the structure. O'Connor dove for cover, returning fire. Told you they were waiting. Daniels took out two enemies with precise headshots, her face set in grim determination. Keep moving. We can't stop here. Carter took point, leading them down the corridor as the battle intensified. Plasma bolts struck the walls, sending sparks flying. Gervaux moved with deadly efficiency, slashing through his former comrades without hesitation. They reached a set of reinforced blast doors, thick and unyielding. Carter cursed. Gervaux, can you get us through? The alien moved to the control panel, his claws tapping rapidly. The lockdown sequence is active. I need time. Time they didn't have. More Selkarth forces were closing in, heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. O'Connor fired wildly. Hurry up. Man. Gervaux's mandibles twitched. Almost. A plasma bolt struck O'Connor in the chest. He gasped, stumbling back as smoke rose from the wound. His rifle slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor. Daniels screamed. No. Carter lunged forward, catching O'Connor before he collapsed. Blood dripped from his mouth as he tried to speak. Damn, that hurts. Carter pressed a hand to the wound, his heart pounding. Stay with me, O'Connor. We're almost there. O'Connor gave a weak smile. Nah, we both know that's not happening. The door finally hissed open. Gervaux turned. Inside. Now. Daniels helped Carter lift O'Connor, dragging him through the entrance as Gervaux sealed the door behind them. More plasma fire pounded against the metal, but for now, they were safe. Carter laid O'Connor down gently. His friend coughed, his breathing shallow. Daniels clenched her fists. Damn it, we should have been faster. O'Connor chuckled weakly. Yeah, well, you always were slow, Daniels. She laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes. Carter grabbed O'Connor's hand. We'll finish this. For you. O'Connor gave a final, slow nod before his eyes closed. Carter clenched his jaw, forcing down the grief. There was no time for mourning. They had a mission to complete. Gervais motioned toward the command node, an enormous, pulsating core of alien energy suspended in the center of the chamber. It was the heart of the citadel, glowing with an eerie blue light. Daniels set her rifle. So how do we break it? Gervais studied the structure. The conduits feed directly into the fleet's central command network. Severing them will trigger a collapse. Carter nodded. Then let's cut them. They split up, moving quickly as they planted explosives along the conduits. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of the mission pressing down on them. Then, the doors burst open. A massive Selkarth warrior stepped through, twice the size of any they had fought before. His armor gleamed, his energy weapon crackling with raw power. Daniels cursed. "Oh, come on." The warrior's deep voice echoed through the chamber. "You are fools to think you could defy us." Gervais stepped forward. "No, you are fools to underestimate them." The warrior sneered. "You betray your own kind." Gervais's mandibles twitched. "My kind lost their honor long ago." The warrior charged. Carter and Daniels opened fire, but the shots barely slowed him. Gervais met him head-on, claws clashing against the warrior's weapon in a deadly dance of speed and strength. Sparks flew as they exchanged blows. Carter sprinted toward the final conduit, setting the last charge. "Daniels, cover me." She fired at the warrior, trying to distract him. "Hurry up, Carter." Gervais fought with everything he had, but the warrior was too strong. A brutal strike sent him crashing to the ground. The warrior loomed over him. "You are weak." Gervais's eyes locked onto Carter. "Detonated." Carter's fingers hovered over the detonator. "Gervais." The alien's voice was firm. "Now." The warrior raised his weapon for the killing blow. Carter pressed the trigger. The explosion ripped through the conduits, sending shockwaves across the citadel. The core erupted in a cascade of energy, destabilizing the entire structure. The warrior barely had time to react before the blast consumed him. Gervais was lost in the fire. Carter grabbed Daniels, dragging her toward an emergency hatch as the citadel crumbled around them. They leaped into an escape pod, launching away just as the fortress detonated in a massive explosion, lighting up the sky. The shockwaves spread across the battlefield below. Selkarth ships faltered, their coordination broken. The invasion force fell into disarray as human forces took advantage, striking back with everything they had. Daniels gasped for breath, watching from the pod's viewport. "Did we just win?" Carter exhaled, staring at the destruction. "Not yet, but we just gave humanity a fighting chance." The war wasn't over, but tonight they had defied the impossible. And for those they had lost, they would keep fighting. The escape pod trembled as it pierced through the upper atmosphere, flames licking the hull as it descended toward the ruined city below. Carter gripped the straps of his seat, his knuckles white. Daniels sat beside him, her face illuminated by the flickering morning lights inside the pod. Outside, the sky was filled with chaos. Selkarth warships faltered, some spiraling out of control, others breaking apart as human forces launched a brutal counterattack. The command citadel was gone, its burning wreckage scattered across the heavens like dying embers. Daniels exhaled sharply. "I still can't believe we did it." Carter barely registered her words. His mind was still in the citadel, replaying the explosion, Gervais's final stand, O'Connor's last breath. The victory felt hollow. They had survived, but at what cost? The pod's thrusters engaged, slowing their descent as they neared the ground. The ruins of what was once a major city stretched beneath them, burning buildings, shattered streets, and the remains of countless fallen soldiers, both human and alien. The world had changed forever. With a heavy thud, the pod made landfall. The doors hissed open, releasing a rush of hot, smoke-filled air. Carter unbuckled himself and stepped out first, rifle in hand, scanning the area. The battle was still raging in the distance, but the tide had shifted. Zelkart forces, once an unstoppable wave, now fought desperately as human resistance surged forward, emboldened by the destruction of the enemy command structure. Daniels climbed out beside him, taking in the sight. Looks like we weren't the only ones fighting back. A group of human soldiers spotted them, their weapons raised at first, but when they recognized Carter and Daniels, their expressions shifted from suspicion to awe. A young soldier, barely out of his teens, ran toward them. "Holy hell, you're alive. We thought everyone in the Citadel was wiped out." Carter exchanged a glance with Daniels before nodding. Not everyone made it. The soldier's face fell. O'Connor. Daniels swallowed hard. He didn't make it. A heavy silence hung in the air. The soldiers who had fought alongside them, who had laughed with O'Connor, now bowed their heads. In war, death was expected, but that didn't make it any easier. Another soldier stepped forward, an older man with a scar running across his cheek. "Your team took down the command citadel. We've been intercepting enemy communications. Without their central network, their forces are in complete disarray. They're retreating." Daniels let out a breath of relief. "So we won." The older soldier shook his head. "Not yet, but for the first time, we have a chance." Carter nodded slowly. The war wasn't over, but humanity had been given a lifeline. He looked at the sky, where the wreckage of the Selkarth fleet still burned. Gervos had given his life to make this happen. An alien who had started as their prisoner, their enemy, who had chosen to fight alongside them. Daniels nudged him. "We should report to command. They'll want to know what happened up there." Carter hesitated before speaking. "Gervos helped us. He didn't have to, but he did. He saved us." The young soldier frowned. "He was one of them." Daniels shook her head. "No, he was one of us." The older soldier nodded solemnly. "I'll make sure his sacrifice isn't forgotten." Carter straightened his shoulders. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, there was still a war to finish. They moved toward the human base, a makeshift stronghold built from the wreckage of the city. The atmosphere was different from before. Not just survival, but hope. Soldiers patched up wounds, repaired weapons, and planned their next moves. The sight of Carter and Daniels returning sparked murmurs throughout the camp. A high-ranking officer, his uniform stained with blood and soot, stepped forward. "I need a full report. What the hell happened up there?" Carter took a deep breath. "The command citadel is gone. Their network collapsed. They're running scared." The officer's eyes widened. "You actually did it." He exhaled sharply, then turned to his communications officer. "Get this out to every remaining resistance cell. We're taking back our planet." Cheers erupted around them. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, victory felt possible. Daniels leaned in close to Carter. "Think we'll live to see the end of this?" Carter smirked slightly. "We've beaten the odds this far." Daniels chuckled. "Guess we'll just have to keep doing the impossible." As the sun began to rise over the ruined city, Carter looked around at the faces of the survivors. They had lost so much, but they were still here, still fighting. And as long as there was even one human left standing, they would never surrender.